Hey there, and welcome back to another Ben McGreevy Sports Podcast. Honestly, this is our most emotional episode yet. We go in and we start out talking Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in chaos right now. They're in disarray. Their fan base is losing their mind. So if you're a Toronto fan and you're here, we're starting with Toronto. It is wild. It's crazy. We have no idea what Toronto needs to do, except for that we have some ideas. So stick around for that. And then we move into Nashville Predators because they are the most untalked about bad team of the year. They look atrocious right now. And we talk about what we think Nashville needs to do. And I might go on a little bit of a soapbox at one point near the end of the podcast. So stick around for that. Also, we are featuring an artist today that I think you will love. So be sure to stick around to the very end to listen to that song. So let's get started in this week's Ben McGreevy Sports Podcast. Today we're going to just jump straight to the Leafs because the Toronto Maple Leafs fans are losing their marbles right now. They lost last night to Anaheim, one of the worst teams in the league, the worst power play in the NHL. They lost to the Sharks. The Toronto Maple Leafs absolutely have looked atrocious on their road trip. They lost to Arizona before leaving on that road trip. Do Leafs fans, should they be overreacting, or is this a righteous reaction right now? Heath, you're here. You're here to talk about this. You're wearing your Leafs polo, for crying out loud. That's just like a big like, oh, boom, take that, Leaf fans. What do you think about the Toronto Maple Leafs up to this point?
Yeah, I think Toronto. They've had an interesting start to the season. I think with the history of the Toronto of the last 10 or so years and their playoff issues, and I think um, I guess you could almost say the fan base obviously is getting very impatient with the GM coaching and the players, especially here in Toronto. Um, Obviously, losing to Arizona was not a good loss, and Toronto, they get the win against Dallas in overtime before they head on that was it 4 or 5 game road trip, and then they beat Winnipeg there as well as they begin their road trip here in California. And this is a team that, on paper, looks really good. I don't really care for their goaltending. The goaltending acquisition of Matt Murray, obviously, who stays hurt, is on long term IR. So their goaltending situation is not great currently. I think they're okay in that term, and that they can probably stay afloat with the goaltending they have. But these 4 losses they have, I mean, they get basically they could have gotten beat worse by Vegas. Vegas is good. San Jose, you have to beat San Jose through Toronto. San Jose is not a good hockey team. LA does not look very good, and they lose to LA. And then you and I talked about it last night. A great game, um, for with Anaheim and Toronto, but Anaheim is terrible. Their system play that they have it's a lack of awareness for Anaheim. They don't look good, and they go out and they blow a 2 goal lead with multiple turnovers by Marner, um, and they lose in overtime 4-3. You know, I don't think it's full on out. Let's freak out, fire everybody, and trade everything yet for the Leafs. But I can definitely see where they're coming from because this is a team that should not be losing these games.
There is one Leaf fans overreacting is one of the funniest things to me.
Oh,
A
it's
guy who
hilarious.
has made a name for himself in this world is Steve Dangle. He just reacts poorly, and I am one of the many who, like, when the Leafs lose a game like this, the first thing I do is like, oh, I'm pumped for that Dangle video, right? Like that is like I watched this today. He said, "You guys are sick." Like those of you who show up after a game like this. He said something like he would get like when the Leafs are good, he loses viewers, and he was like, "I give it all up for this." He had like tears in his eyes. Leaf fans are losing their minds. All right, it is just like it is so funny to watch. But like I feel their pain. I understand how much it hurts. They are a perpetual losing team. They are so good on paper. They have Austin Matthews. They have John Tavares. They have William Nylander. They have Mitch Marner. They have Morgan Riley. You start going down the list of players who play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the fact that they aren't dominating every single game they play is ridiculous. I mean, they are way too good to be this bad. And by the way, we're gonna stick to that theme. We get to Nashville in a little bit because I think that we can see a similar theme with Nashville. And so, as a fan reacting to this, Toronto is 4-4-2 right now. It's not like, I mean, they're losing way more than they should, but it's not like they haven't won a game. It's not like they're Columbus. It's not like they're Anaheim, who's only won 2, or Arizona, who's only won 2, or San Jose, who's only won 3. All 3 of those teams did beat Toronto. But you sit there and walk through it. I don't know what the solution for Toronto is. Let's try to take a step back, and we're going to try to do this for both Toronto and Nashville in this podcast. If you could take a step back and say, okay, what does Toronto need to do? They are 10 games into the season. You are the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What are you doing to this team right now?
I think this is this. I don't think this is a coaching issue currently with Toronto. I think this is a group. Most of these players have been together for a while. I think this is a group that needs either a come to reality moment of you are going to be as good as you play every night. These ridiculous I mean, this is you have 2 terrible turnovers by Marner on, I think, their first goal. He was in the corner and he just throws it right into the slot almost, gives it to a Ducks player. I forgot who it is. And he throws it right into the slot and it's a goal. And then you get Alexander Kerfoot. It would have been, I believe, the second goal of the game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This was hilarious. I don't know if you can pull it up, but it was hilarious. This Kerfoot starts celebrating,
Oh,
and the
it
puck
was
was
so
supposed to
bad.
go. All he had to do was tip it in. It would have been a goal. But he starts celebrating, and it goes wide.
Yeah.
It's a lack of detail and attention and awareness on the ice. They're just throwing pucks everywhere. Matthews threw a puck to Marner in the third period, which led to the second goal, Trevor Zegras breakaway. And it goes to his skates, and then Marner turns it over. And then you got a breakaway with Trevor Zegras, and he's going to burn the goalie all day. So I think this is more of a player standpoint. They've got to get in the locker room and really say, look, you're going to have to start producing, or we're going to have to make some changes here.
To me, this is I sit there and I see these players and they're between their ears right now. I mean, when you sit here and the thing that's going viral right now from this Leafs game last night is Mitch Marner getting benched, getting mad, going down the tunnel, smashing his stick, not coming back, and then finally like being like, all right, come back to the bench, comes back to the bench and immediately gets put in the game. It's like Sheldon Keefe benched him and then brought him back in. It wasn't a great look, but like Mitch Marner's too good of a player to be making mistakes like that. Why is Marner making mistakes like that? Why isn't Matthews scoring? Why isn't Kerfoot's stick on the ground? Uh, when you sit here, the Leafs were bad to start out last year, by the way. I don't know, like they weren't winning games to start out last year, but I did see this stat that their first 10 games compared to last year, while it's a similarly bad start in winning, they are getting notably destroyed in other stats. Like their Corsi for is worse. Their Corsi against is worse. You sit there and their goals against is like the only thing that's a little bit better, but their goals for is worse. You start going through that. Their shots for is worse. I am a little bit concerned that they are a better team on paper than a lot of teams in the NHL, but when it comes to the gameplay, they're worse. I think if I was the president, and I had to make changes, I think I would be trying to look for something to shake it up. And I don't know if it's trading a big player. Like, what are you gonna do? Trade Austin Matthews? Like, you're not gonna do that. What are you gonna do? Trade John Tavares? Who wants that contract? Uh, Marner's like an interesting one that you could move, but I don't think you want to move Mitch Marner. He's too good. Nylander, Sheldon Keefe is using him improperly, but like, do you want to trade? I don't know. I I kind of think I don't know. You said it's not a coaching thing. I think for me, I would Sheldon Keefe is gone. That's my perspective on it. I think the roster's built well. Um, I think Sheldon Keefe, time for him to get fired. And that's just because I think they need a spark. They need something that's going to click where it's like, all right, we got this. We got something new. We have new life. Sheldon Keefe has been these guys' coach. They were children in the AHL. Then he gets them, like Mike Babcock has them for a couple years. Then they start out terribly. Babcock gets fired. I'm kind of shocked that that was the Western road trip, remember? And
Yeah.
then like, why isn't Sheldon Keefe at that point where he gets fired? Toronto doesn't play until I'm like gonna get this exact. When do they play next? Do you have that
It's
pulled up?
Wednesday. They play Wednesday. I think they play Philly.
Philadelphia. So they have Philadelphia,
And then they got the next game. So they're going to
Boston,
get steamrolled.
Carolina,
Mm.
Vegas.
Mm. I mean, you're looking at probably 3 losses out of 4 games, and maybe 4 games or 4 losses because Philly's not playing terrible.
If they lose, I mean that's almost 4 unwinnable games. If they lose 3 of those 4, why is Sheldon Keefe still have a job?
I think you've got to fire him. You've got to do, like we're saying, you've got to do something to let the locker room know you mean business and you're not going to stand for this kind of play. And if firing the coach and bringing in somebody else, as an interim job that doesn't spark the team, then I think you probably have to look into actually making a roster move.
Yep.
And if that doesn't spark the team, I don't know what you do.
Who's your
Because
guy? Out of the big 4, who do you move? And when I say the big 4,
yeah,
Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander.
um, I think you're going to have to probably move Marner. I don't think Nylander holds as much value as Marner does. But with that said, I think you'd have to pick between Marner and Nylander. I don't think you move Matthews or Tavares. I really lean on the head side of Marner.
I think the return for Marner has to be massive. And let's do this. Let's play through this Marner trade because I'm wondering if anyone's willing to pay the premium to get Mitch Marner. I don't know. Let's talk through that a little bit.
I mean,
What does a trade for Marner look like that's acceptable?
they're going to want, it depends on if let's say they lose those 4 games, right? Let's say they win 3 of the 4. Or I'm sorry, reverse what I said. Lose 3 of the 4. Um, at that point, they're probably far out of the playoffs. I think you could probably consider this team not making playoffs. You're probably looking at a draft pick or something. I don't know. You're gonna Mitch Marner at 10.9 million. I don't even know who wants to take that contract on.
I'll take it.
Yeah, Nashville can
I mean,
take it.
it's Mitch Marner, man. It's Mitch Marner.
You're gonna have to give up probably 2 first rounders and somebody else, maybe a defenseman.
Here's my question: is Mitch
But
Marner not worth that?
you're talking about a mess.
Who's a team that's close? Like who's a piece away from needing from the playoffs right now?
I'm sorry, say again.
Who is one player away from being a playoff team, or yeah, let's just say being a good playoff team? Who's one player away? And maybe we're just talking about this as we kind of walk through this. I just want to sit here and say, okay, when I'm pulling up wild card standings right now, which by the way, we're not going to talk about them today, but New Jersey Devils, man, leading the Metro, they look good right now.
Yeah.
They look real good. But okay, so the Devils, they might be a piece away. The Rangers, the Flyers, the Boston Bruins, Florida Panthers, Buffalo Sabres. Let's talk about like Detroit is maybe a piece away, but let's go west because I don't think Toronto wants to move Marner into the east. Okay, so Minnesota can't do it because of their cap situation.
Mm-mm.
You have the Blues. Man, I don't know. Maybe the Canucks. Who is the team that's close to the playoffs? The Kings that you think they get Mitch Marner and suddenly they're a contender?
In the West, obviously it's going to depend on cap space, but I think I would have to lean on towards probably St. Louis. I like their team. I think they're right on the cusp there. I think they'll turn this season around for them.
Yeah.
But I think St. Louis, they can probably give up a little bit to gain something in return. So
Well, that's an interesting thing because you could sit there and say, okay, who's gonna want Toronto wants something in return? Let me throw this hypothetical at you: Jordan Kyrou or Mitch Marner? Who do you want?
as a sole player,
Yeah.
probably hate to say it, I like Kyrie better,
Okay. Really?
but I do. But with that being
Okay.
said,
No.
I
I mean, that's fine.
I think Marner feeds off Matthews a little bit, and his line mates. But with that being said, I think Marner could fit right into the if they moved Kyrou and let's say another player, because that's who Toronto's going to want.
Hey, Kyrou. Well, and that's the interesting thing. Does a guy like Kyrou? So Kyrou's about to have an
Mm-hmm.
$8.125 million cap hit, as is Robert Thomas. All right, so you take those guys. Those guys are big cap hits. They also have guys like Torrey Krug, Colton Parayko, Justin Falk. Does which Toronto right defenseman? Does a but if you're St. Louis, do you give up Kyrou and Justin Falk to get a Mitch Marner? I don't think you do.
I don't think you do. I don't think you can give up two big name players out of St. Louis and come out of that as a positive. To put you into that, you're back into the contender category. So I don't, St. Louis, I really like where they could be with them. But if you're going to have to move two big name players, I don't think it's going to work.
It's weird because Mitch Marner has had huge seasons in Toronto. Jordan Kyrou has had a 35-point season and a 75-point season. If you're St. Louis, the better player is Mitch Marner. Do you take the better play? And obviously, we just threw St. Louis out there. We could go through this with anyone. We have a lot of Florida Panthers fans who watch this or who listen to this podcast. Let's look at this and say, okay, if you're the Florida Panthers, you have $5 million in cap space. You've got a clear cap. You don't have a ton of draft. Actually, you have very few draft picks. But hey, you know what? You're going for it. Let's say you're the Panthers. You're not trading Barkov. You're not trading Kachuk. The Leafs aren't going to be happy with Sam Reinhart. They're not going to be happy with, you go down their roster. They're not going to be happy with many people. I mean,
No.
And that's, you start going through it. It's hard to move Marner. I wonder if Nylander's way easier to move for them.
Yeah, I think so because his asking price isn't going to be nearly as much as Marner. I don't think. But at Toronto, I don't know. They're pretty hard when they come to their trades, and with Nylander, I think you could move him much easier than Marner, but it would be a tough one as well.
This is why I think that you have to just fire Sheldon Keefe, because it's way easier to fire Keefe and get a replacement because right now it's obvious Sheldon Keefe and Mitch Marner and William Nylander don't work together.
No.
Like it's that to me is so obvious. So maybe you just fire the coach because that's easier than trying to move Nylander for something good or Marner for something good. And I don't think Tavares and Matthews are touchable. So that's where I think, hey, if Toronto loses 3 of the next 4, or if they lose the next 2, I think that's very feasible as well. If you keep losing, something's going to change.
You're looking at, I think that if you lose the next 2, it's six losses in a row. I mean, Granted, you're playing Boston, who's really has surprised many people the start of the season. Same with Philly, but I mean that's in Toronto. You've got to win at least. You got to split at least both of the one of those games. I mean, it, I just don't foresee what their upcoming schedule. I don't know if they could win any of those games. Maybe up until Vancouver, and they're coming off a back to back, so I'll probably lose to Vancouver too.
All right. Speaking of teams that aren't going to win a lot of games in their next several, from what we feel, Nashville Predators. Let's move on to them. Oh, okay. You and I, Predators fans, Nashville has not looked good at all. Nashville goes in, and what they do is you feel like, okay, they get beat in a lot of games straight, right? They lose to Dallas, they lose to LA, they lose to Columbus, they lose to Philadelphia. They have a big break. You're sitting there saying they're going to lose to St. Louis, and then they beat St. Louis handily. And what is your reaction? Well, maybe they figured something out. And then the next game they get shut out by the Washington Capitals, which, by the way, we both stayed home from that game to watch the Tennessee game. And I almost never am like, man, I'm like happy I didn't go. That night, it was like, you know what? Watching the Vols destroy Kentucky was satisfying. And I knew that I would have left Bridgestone Arena irritated that night.
Oh, that was such a boring game too.
Oh, a snooze fest all the way around. But Nashville's upcoming schedule is at Edmonton tomorrow night. We're recording this on Monday. Halloween. Happy Halloween. You're not going to watch this probably till Tuesday, but we're recording it on Monday. We didn't dress up. I kind of feel lame. And then they go to so at Edmonton, then at Calgary, at Vancouver, at Seattle, at Colorado, home versus the Rangers. Oh boy. Speaking of teams that aren't going to win a lot, how do we think Nashville does during this stretch of games?
Well, first I want to go back to the St. Louis game really quick.
Right.
Yes, they did absolutely wreck St. Louis, but they also St. Louis came off a back to back, and also St. Louis has been struggling as of late. And they played the backup goaltender who did not look very good. So anyway, moving into this 5-6 game stretch where 5-game road trip and then you finish off the week with New York Rangers, who also probably a contender this year, even though they haven't started great. And I think you could totally see 6 losses here. Vancouver and Seattle are probably going to be your 2 games that you should win. Seattle, though, obviously looked really good this year so far. But I think Edmonton, you're going to probably lose. Calgary, you'll get throttled. I think your 2 you have to win are Vancouver and Seattle, and I don't know if you can win.
By the way, do you know what's funny to me? Seattle and Toronto had the same record, but the expectations are so different. And also the West is bad this year, but like the expectations are so different. I just think that's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah. Oh, it really is. I mean, yeah, it is. But like you're saying, the West it's the Central. The Central's just weird right now. I mean, you've got 3 teams at the top of the Central Division, which granted 10, 9, anywhere from 7 to 10 games played per team. So you're not going to have much gap in points yet. But you couldn't have told me to start the season Dallas was going to be 5-3-1 with 11 points, or Chicago 4-3-2 at 10 points in third.
Is it weird that even though Nashville looks atrocious, because I think they are the worst I've seen them look in years. I mean, like they look bad.
They look real. I mean, your turnovers all night. Yossi doesn't look good. Penalties. I mean, they look real quick. In their power plays, 30th in the NHL. They've scored 3 goals on 36 power plays, and one of those came against Washington, and it took a 6-on-4 to score, which I felt really. No, not Washington. Philly. It took a 6-on-4 against Philly, which I felt really bad for Carter Hart because he deserved a great shutout. He had like 36. It was a great game for Carter Hart, but their penalty kill is actually decent. But man, the amount of penalties they take is just ridiculous.
I tend to look at Nashville like this. By the way, I looked up this comparison. I also wanted us to address the question of, okay, we're the president of the Nashville Predators. What do we do? Um, let's look at history of time. One, I don't think the roster is bad. I can't look at this roster and be like, that's bad. I sit there and say, okay, I would the Duchesne center with Granlund and Forsberg is good. Johansson with Niederreiter and whoever they're playing on that second line is pretty good. Like the lineup's pretty decent. The defensive core is pretty solid. Goaltending is solid. Like I don't dislike the roster. So I can't look at David Poile and say this is on him. Now you get to the coaching, and this is where I think it's kind of interesting. In the 1920 season, Peter Laviolette got fired for a mediocre, unresponsive team. Do you know what they started in their first 9 games that year? Which were 9 games in for the Predators. They are 3-5-1 with 2 wins against a really bad San Jose team. Do you know what the Preds started that year?
I can't remember. I don't know.
5-3-1.
I felt
They
yeah.
they started 5-3-1 in the year that Peter Laviolette got fired, and pretty much maintained those statistics throughout the rest, like until he got fired. If you go back and look at their record with Peter Laviolette that year, and I want to make sure of this. Peter Laviolette was 19-15-7. Not great, by the way. 19-15-7 is not good, but it is better than what they are on pace for right now. Right now, if you were to sit there and look at it, they are on pace. Oh, it's so like you sit there, it's way worse. It's way
Yeah,
worse. I should have
it's
done the
really
actual
bad.
numbers on it. I feel terrible about that. But my question is this. System looks bad. It's the same thing that we talked about with Toronto. What are you going to do? Trade everyone? No, that doesn't make sense. You literally have
Yeah.
to trade everyone or go for it.
Yeah.
Have you seen how old the roster is? It's trade everyone or go for it. Go for it. You got to fire. To me, I'm not a fire the coach type guy like I once was, but you got to change something. What's that going to be?
Yeah.
It's not assistant coaches. What's the change?
I agree. Like, and you and I have talked about this over the last few weeks. I'm the same way. I've never been big on just flat out saying fire the head coach, because I do think it comes down to the players have to play and do their job on the ice every night up to the standards which they're held. But with that being said, there's something obviously wrong here with Nashville. The inexcusable amount of penalties they take, their power play, that's just absolutely terrible.
With, by the
I
way,
think this one,
players that should be so good.
yeah,
I mean, like their power
yeah,
play should be great.
their power play, their power play should be fantastic. I mean, you're running with Yossi, I believe, on the first pairing there, on the first power play line there, and there's no excuse for this, especially against teams like, um, even though Dallas had a hot start to the season playing Dallas, you should not be getting blown out by Dallas 5-1, 4-1. You should not be. The big kicker that really threw this into kind of overdrive of calling for Hines was where they blew a 2-goal lead to LA and losing a shootout. Then they blow a 2-goal lead in the third period again against a very bad Columbus team. But instead of getting a point and forcing an overtime game, they blow it outright in regulation. And this is a team that can't score. They average about 2.5 goals a game now. I think they sit in 30th of all 32 teams in scoring. I mean, it's terrible. With the roster you have, I think you have to actually fire Hines. And the thing I don't want Poile to do, if they do fire Hines, is to make this immediate coaching hire, bring in a guy a week later, sign him to a 3-year contract and say he's our guy for 3 years. No. Let the season play out. You're probably not gonna make playoffs at this point already. I hate to say it, unless
Here,
you just really turn it
well,
around.
here's the thing though that I was also gonna bring up. We say that one win puts you 1 point out of the playoffs. The
Right.
West is bad.
The
So
West is really bad.
my thing is like, is Chicago, their roster's not good. So
No, I don't think
Chicago
they're gonna
can't
hold up.
maintain. I just kind of look at this and say, okay, Nashville still has a shot at the playoffs, but if they keep playing as they're playing, they don't.
But here's my thing. Do you even wanna make playoffs? Because Nashville's gonna get absolutely wrecked in the first round, most likely. And I get it. Playoffs is a big deal for a franchise because the money it brings in and the publicity and all this stuff. But is it really obviously it's an 82 game season. It's a long season. Nashville could totally turn things around and all of a sudden you could throw them into the contender category if they absolutely just start wrecking teams out of the water, which I don't think they will. Um, but if they look just average again, they go in the playoffs, and let's say they got to play like Vegas or somebody, they're going to get wrecked. I mean,
Well,
is it worth going into the playoffs again just to lose to get another draft pick that's in the middle of the pack? And I get it. The draft pick stuff, you can say draft high, draft low, do whatever, but I don't know.
here's my thing with like, is it worth making playoffs though? Is that if you don't make playoffs, you have to fire sale everything because your roster is so old. Like my issue with this whole idea of like, is it worth making playoffs? Is like, I need to just pull up the roster with ages. I just bit my tongue. Ouch. I need to pull up the roster with ages. All right, so oh man, they have their birth year on here. That's annoying. Uh,
Nope.
let's see here. That is, I hate it when they do that. I'm not gonna math the entire time. All right, so here we go. Philip Forsberg, 28 years old. All right, so Forsberg's a decent age, but if you rebuild, say it takes 4 or 5 years, Philip Forsberg is then 32, 33. He's then old, right? Matt Duchene, 31. Ryan Johansson, 30. Granlund, 30. Nino Niederreiter, 30. Colton Sissons, 28. Then you start getting to your younger guys. Trinan is 25. Tolvanen's 23. Cody Glass is 23. But like, we're starting to get to some of these guys where it's like, okay, why does it matter? Then Roman Yossi, 32. Ryan McDonough, 33. Matthias Ekholm, 32. Staros is 27, so he's fine. And you have Ascara, so you're fine. Your goaltending is fine. I'm saying the rest of the roster, you don't have time to rebuild.
No, you don't.
Like, it's fire sale or make the playoffs.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of all in. And if they don't, if the Preds have to show me that they're all in, if they're not all in, if they're not willing to make the change, if they're not willing to do something at the coaching position, if they're not even willing to sit there and say, hey, general manager, you're not willing to make a change at the coaching position, we're not willing to suffer in mediocrity. We have a
Yeah.
roster that's old. The core's old. They're getting past their prime.
Yeah.
The best players should be at their best right now. In 2 years, they're not. So it's trade them all now or go for it now. And what do we want to do? Trade or go for it?
Yeah. I mean, I forgot they were kind of an older team now because they've been around for so long. You kind of forget that they've been here that long, I guess.
We've been watching this core since 2015.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah. I mean, you do kind of have to go for it. If you want an opportunity at a cup, you have you have to go for it over the next 2 years.
Yeah. And that's my issue is like, okay, why are we wasting time? The Thanksgiving rule is almost always accurate. Who's in the playoffs at Thanksgiving gets in. Nashville's not going to be in the playoffs at Thanksgiving if they don't start winning games. And with their current coach and system and power play, I don't know, man. Like, I just don't see them. I don't see them winning anything. Like the 2019 Blues, their roster was really good, but was it? I mean, was it that much better than Nashville's current roster? No.
Not
I
really.
mean,
No,
Ryan
they got
O'Reilly is
hot.
a good. They got hot. This roster
I
can get hot.
mean, you look at the 2017 season. I mean, granted, there are some players on this team that are not, or were on that team that are not here anymore, and there are some players on this team that weren't there, but they got hot going into playoffs. That's all it takes. But I do think you need to make a coaching change.
I unfortunately I think the coaching change has to happen. And I once again, I think John Hines is a good guy, but he has never won at the NHL level. Ever.
I, I just want to bring something up. Over his tenure, right, with Nashville, they've lost in the qualifying round, they lost in the playoffs, and they got swept, right? In his three
Yeah.
postseason time. They've won 3 games in those 3 postseasons. One obviously being a qualifying round. 1 game against the Coyotes, 2 against
Oh.
Carolina, and got swept last season against obviously didn't have UC Soros, but they didn't even have stand a chance with UC Soros because they looked so bad anyway. So this has been going on for a while. Going back to last season, I still think.
When they and one game doesn't tell a story, but when they blew a last second lead to Calgary and then went and lost to Arizona after blowing a 4-0 lead
Arizona.
to Arizona, a team that was playing for nothing. And you're playing to play Calgary instead of Colorado. There's a problem behind your bench. That is a cultural thing. And to me, I would just love to sit down with Ryan McDonough right now, man, and be like, all right, man,
Yeah.
tell me what's the issue here? Because you're kind of a new guy. You can audit the program from the outside.
Yeah.
What's the
And
issue?
he's got the veteran status. He's won cups with Tampa. He knows what a winning franchise in the back doors of the franchise looks like.
He could sit there and tell you, dude, this is all system and coaching. This
Yeah.
system's great. He could tell you that it's the players. He could tell you it's the captain. He could tell you it's the organization. I struggle because I am not a currently fire David Poyle person. Why has Poyle never won a Stanley Cup is still something I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I get disheartened when I sit here and think about this because um winning is so fun. And we don't talk a lot of college football on this pod, but we will for a minute because we're Tennessee fans and Tennessee is really good right now. And I'm gonna use this parallel to come back to Nashville in a second. Tennessee looks really bad. They fired Jeremy Pruitt. Bring in a guy who's not a flashy hire. Like Josh Heupel was not a flashy hire, and there are some hockey fans right now who are like, "What is college football?" If you're watching this, but I think a lot of our audience are Tennessee people, so you get this right. They go get Josh Heupel. Heupel comes in, loses. How many guys did they lose in the transfer
I think it was
portal?
like 25 or something,
A
or maybe
lot.
15, but a lot.
Most of their starters gone. Josh Heupel comes in, has a pretty good first year. Not great, but pretty good, right? This year, he has Tennessee at, we're going to find out with the College Football Playoff Committee rankings tomorrow, but let's just say for AP poll right now, number 2 in the country is where Tennessee is right now. They are 8-0 with wins at LSU, at defending ACC champion Pitt, against Alabama, against Florida, and against Kentucky, who was a ranked team coming into that game. You know what made Tennessee win those games? Not superior athletes, not the better players. The guy who knew how to put the guys in the right spot to win. The guy who knew how to inspire guys to win. And now you look at the experience in Knoxville, Tennessee, and guess what it is? It's a setting of greatness. Now Tennessee might very well lose to Georgia this weekend and be 8-1 and maybe in the season 11-1. Who cares? It's your head coach's second year. This is John Hines' third year in Nashville, and they haven't shown me a single thing to make me think he's the guy. Every 3 games, I'm like, is he the guy? I don't know. I can't decide. Maybe his time's up. They're professionals. Win fast. They're pros. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if you really want to get into it, the John Hines comes to a Predators team who in the last 10 years has been very successful. Josh Heupel comes into a Tennessee Volunteers pro football program who has been very, very unsuccessful in the last 10, 12 years. Granted, it's two different sports, but
It is.
It's the same analogy. You got to find the right guy.
Putting the players that you have in the position to succeed. That's the thing. Heupel did that. He said, you know what? We have this guy. He didn't leave. We have this guy. He didn't leave. They might not be better than the guys over there, but you know what they are? We can put them in the position to succeed. Why has Nashville not done anything to put these players in a position to succeed? I can't figure it out. I'm irritated by it. I'm dumbfounded by it. It has grinded my gears to an extent where I'm sitting there saying, how stubborn are you? Have we even tried McDonough and Yossi together?
No. The last game I went to when Cole and I were there, I think it started out with. Don't quote me on this. I don't recall 100% because the line started changing left and right. It was originally Fabro and I believe Yossi, and then it changed, and then it went like Fabro, McDonough, It was a mess because he and I were trying to figure it out, and it was a mess.
Last game. This is as of October 29th. These were the defensive pairings: Yossi Fabro, Etcombe Carrier, McDonough Lazon. Why are they not trying Yossi and McDonough together? Why are they not trying things that are decent? I'm sick and tired of it, man. Like,
I mean, what do you have to lose
tomorrow?
at this point? What do you have to lose anymore? Another loss? Whoa, another loss.
The national media is not covering the Nashville Predators' failure like they should. I listen every single day to the Jeff Merrick show. Based in Toronto, they've talked about Toronto. They've talked about Vancouver. They've talked about Anaheim. They've talked about like these teams that are like no market teams, right? Have not even mentioned the Nashville Predators. Then it's not getting the media attention that it should. Nashville looks atrocious, and no one's talking about it. I don't know. I don't know what the next step is.
I don't know. I just know that this team is not currently working under Hines.
You got to do something. And maybe it's trading someone for Mitch Marner. Let's play with that. All right, we've been upset. Let's play with this. This will be the last thing we do on the pod today. Let's have fun. Nashville Predators decide we need to change. Let's go get Mitch Marner. What's the trade you're making to get Mitch? Will it work? What's the trade you're going to make? This is kind of fun, right? This is where it gets weird.
Yeah, this would be tough. They're going to want for Mitch Marner.
Dante Fabro's gone, by the way.
I think, yeah. Fabro can go, and I think they're going to probably want like Man, that's a tough one. I think you're gonna have to. You could probably try to get away with Ryan Johansson. I don't think obviously he does not match up nearly as good as Mitch Marner is. Philip Forsberg comes to mind, but
They would love to get. They would do Forsberg for Marner.
I think if you put Forsberg, Fabro, and Marner,
They
they would
maybe
take,
do that, but I
and
don't.
you'd probably have to throw in a draft pick
Ugh.
because Marner's. I'm just it's a massive asking price for Marner.
Let me.
And
As a
unfortunately, Philip
as a
Forsberg has a no movement clause,
yes,
but
he does.
whatever.
Uh, it's weird because like as a Preds fan, I take that. Like I would take
Oh
that
yeah,
deal. Marner's 25. You can re-sign him. Forsberg's good, but he's not Mitch Marner. Like I think I'd take that deal. I don't know. Then again, I love Philip Forsberg, and it would hurt to see him go. But you're right. He can never go. He has a no move clause. Uh,
20,
that
2028.
starts in 2028. So actually, you could
You
trade him
can't.
right. What?
No, yeah, 2028. Starting July the 1st. I think it begins in 2028, as in he cannot be traded until 2028. Is what I think that's saying.
Ooh.
Because it says starting July the 1st of 2028, the player can submit a 15-team no trade list.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Don't quote me on that because I could be completely wrong. But
I just realized McDonough signed through 25, 26.
yeah,
Whoa.
so Philip Forsberg has a no movement clause. Starting in 2028, it is a modified no trade clause.
So
So yes, he is not he's not going anywhere until 28.
and Nashville has no chance at getting Mitch Marner. So
No.
that is the exciting thing that you stuck around for. So it's realizing Nashville's garbage and will not get Mitch Marner.
Is this why David Poyle doesn't like no movement clauses? Oh.
It's exactly why. It's exactly why. But David Poyle has never won a Stanley Cup. So
3,000 games and never won a Stanley Cup.
Yeesh.
More than that now, but
All right. Let's close it out. Hopefully we're not as angry in the next podcast, or maybe we are more angry the next day. Like as soon as we finish recording, John Hines will get fired, and that'll be great. And we're not angry because they've won 3. Let's see here. Let's look at the schedule. We'll probably try
there's
to
no
record
way.
maybe next Monday or maybe probably next Monday. So we'll be 3 games into this road trip. We'll see what it's looking like at that point. But it'll be lovely. Heath, thank you for joining. This was a blast, and we got pretty emotional there for a little bit.
Yeah, but it's a long season, so
Very true. Very true. All right. See you later.
see ya.
Thank you again so much for listening to this week's Ben McGreevy Sports Podcast. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it. As always, we need to get the word out there about this podcast. So if you enjoyed this and don't mind sharing it with your friends, that would be incredible. The subscribe button on YouTube means a ton to me. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. It doesn't sound a lot compared to people who are looking at 1 million subscribers or things like that, but it would blow me away. It would be incredible. And so if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, that would be awesome. Put in the comments below, what do you think these teams need to do? Let us know. I would love to hear what your thoughts are, and I would love to hear what other podcast topics you would like to hear us cover as we sit here and walk through the hockey season together. Today, we are featuring Eli Wheeler. We featured his band, Troubadour Blue, to start out the podcast this year, but today we're featuring Eli by himself in one of my favorite songs. It's been in my top played songs on Spotify the last couple of years. It's Sedalia. So here's Eli Wheeler with Sedalia.
Do that ever cross your mind? If I do, I'm so sorry. I think about you every time I cross the desert and you don't call me. So darling, don't make me choose between what's good and what's right. I cannot tell you no any more time. I love you, Sedalia, but goodbye. Oh, goodbye. Leaving in a cloud of dust, there's only heartache in my rear. The more I drive, the less I trust. Mirrors in my car don't show. Well, darling, don't make me choose between what's good and what's right. I cannot tell you no any more time. I love you, Sedalia, but goodbye. Goodbye, sweet Sedalia, goodbye. My sweet Sedalia, please close your eyes. 'Cause I cannot stand to tell them goodbye. My sweet